What were your first impressions of the album?
For me, after listening to the album, it I was impressed the way he just made it simple. It's not about like you getting great production like the way I used of like someone has to go to a big studio to make the production. When I first heard it's like, okay, this guy is just using the guitar and like people singing in the background. It was amazing. And the simplicity and gospel centrality, it just caught my attention. And I loved it because it just made the gospel like to be communal. It made like the gospel is not far away. It's not something you are going to you have to modify it to make it so beautiful to take to some people. It's like no, it's simple and these are the words. Believe them and take them. And I love that the way he made it to be so simple.
Yeah,
For
I
every
agree.
person to listen.
And I think that's one of those major key changes for us too during that time was this difference between like this personal relationship and personal understanding of the gospel. Like I need the gospel personally for the salvation of my sins, for the forgiveness of my sins. But I was just realizing that I also needed the gospel corporately.
Yeah.
I needed the gospel in the context of the church.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realized it until during that time. And that's why I think that, I love the stripped down nature of it too. I think it gives a lot of power.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you, Matthew?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the album. Something that's been really cool for me is in the last 2 weeks, I've finally gotten a chance to be more present in Rhino Refugee Camp out in Uganda, Hastarua, where we live. But because of coronavirus, all the churches have been closed in Uganda. And so I've been talking with ministry partners out in the camp about how they've been doing house church. And they've been talking about how they pray and how they lead worship and how they confess sin and stuff that they were talking about as far as house church goes. Those things were echoed in this album, from 2005 as well. And so it's been really cool to listen to this album over the last week or so and process what does house church look like? What does the body of Christ look like? What does the church as a whole look like in the context of we can't even meet for traditional church like we normally do. And so now what, And so some of our friends from South Sudan and Uganda and Sudan are asking these questions in the camps and teaching me so much. And so it's been cool to have that blended with the album right now. As a whole, kind of like you were saying, Bdubs, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. I loved the more acoustic, stripped down, like live recording kind of vibe. And similar to when we listened a couple weeks ago to Larry Norman's live album, I think a live album in general gives us a little bit of a window into someone's life. And so there were moments throughout the album where I felt like I was engaging more with him as a person than just with his music and more with his ideas than just his lyrics. And so that was really fascinating for me and was something I valued a lot.
Yeah, I'm learning I'm learning a lot through this podcast about myself and what I love in music. Because you don't really think about it. You just think, I like what I like. But as we've been having these conversations, I'm realizing that I like to go beyond just the music. Like the Larry Norman album that we did a few weeks back, it was the same thing. If you remember, I told you guys, like, I wanted you more to experience Larry Norman than experience just one of his albums.
Right.
And I think that's why I chose this live album too, is because I wanted you to experience like the depth of these songs. Not just the song and it's kind of here's the beginning and here's the end, but also like where did it come from and where did it bubble up from? And so I've learned that about myself, that I tend to lean in that direction whenever it comes to music.
Yeah.
So if you want to get punched in the face by an album, I think this is pretty much a good album for that, because like spiritually speaking, if you can listen to this album and not be convicted about something in your life, then I'll be impressed that you're really like, you're right there with like the apostles. Because like I've listened to this album for, I don't know, more than 10 years, 15 years now, 16, I guess.
Wow.
And every time I listen to it, again, I'm reminded of things that either I had given up to the Lord, or I'd taken back, or I've slipped back into this, or I hear something new for the first time and I'm like, wow, there's still this sin in my life that I really need to give over to the Lord. And so I really encourage you, if you're interested in this album, check it out, but be prepared, because it's really hard hitting album, and spiritually it'll hit you in places that you're not expecting.